Now, the final thing I'd like to address is why the selection of air, one of the traditional, at least back in ancient Greece, one of the traditional four elements that people thought everything was made of. Why pick one of those as opposed to a theoretical entity? I mean, if we even think of it from this perspective, I was saying that Anaximander really helped or founded science by coming up with the idea of having a theoretical entity, something that you can't observe. Why pick air? Why would Anaximenes, his student, who made tremendous strides in trying to explain how material in nature appears to change, how it takes on different characteristics, why get rid of the theoretical entity? Why pick air? Think of it. We just went through the continuum of material. That is, it's really all one stuff, but it takes on different characteristics depending on how it's been compacted or through condensation, or how it's been spread out through rarefaction. Think of it, as sort of like making a peanut butter sandwich. Some places, when you're spreading the peanut butter, it's thicker in certain places, and some places it gets spread out, so it looks a little bit different. Maybe it's spread so thin that you can actually see the bread through it. Some places, it's kind of like a mountain. So that's sort of Anaximenes' view of what the basic substance of the whole cosmos is. But it could have been anything on the fire, air, wind, rain, water, earth, earth, stone continuum. It could have been any of those things, but why pick air? And I think there we're going to see that, he didn't think this apiron was really a good entity to be a basic thing, in part because it's not perceivable. He couldn't be certain of its existence. And in this way, among the familiar elements, earth, wind, fire, water, the ones that the traditional ones, air is kind of the most neutral, and if you think about it, it's also the most sort of theoretical, you might say ethereal. Can you give somebody, sort of a bowl full of air? No. Can you really put your hand on it? No. I mean, during the winter, you say, certainly in those days, when it got colder, they saw, they'd be breathing and you'd see the condensation, the sort of the smoke, as we called it when we were kids, coming out of your nose. So you knew that the air was there, or you believed it. But it's really, when you think of it, the most neutral and the most like a theoretical entity, something you can't really get your hands on, but at least in certain ways you can perceive it. You can perceive it in your breath, during the cold weather. And in addition to which, another piece of speculation, he probably thought air was the original element out of which everything else developed. So everything kind of started as air, and it got condensed into fire. And remember, back in those days, all these guys were astronomers, looked up in the sky. How do you see things? Because of the major illumination that you see comes from the sun. Right? That's where the heat and the light came from, was sun. And at night they thought the moon back in those days was its own luminary. It didn't just reflect light, it produced light, they thought, and the stars. So there's the fire and sky that came by condensing the air, and then everything else kind of spread out. So he probably thought it was the original one. Now, I think a good exercise now is to kind of go back through this series of lectures about the naturalists, the Milesian naturalists, the guys from Miletus, from the Greek colonies in Turkey, which we call Ionia in those days, and try to figure out what it is that were their contributions. What was Thales' groundbreaking discovery? What was Anaximander's groundbreaking discovery? What was Anaximenes' groundbreaking discovery?